Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a bonus upload for you. Cryptids, historical accounts in the news. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The audiobook version. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? World's famous sideshow attraction, Julia Pastrana, dies. She was a genuine ape lady. Moscow, Russia, 1860. Julia Pastrana, 1832 through 1860. A highly popular sideshow attraction, has died. Her remarkable appearance made many people think that she was not completely human. Pastrana's early history is shrouded in mystery. We are told that Espinosa, an Indian woman, a so-called root digger Indian in the Sierra Madre region of Mexico, became separated from her tribe in 1830 and was believed to have drowned. However, in 1834, a group of cowboys found her in a cave together with a 2-year-old female child. Espinosa told the cowboys that she had been captured by hostile Indians and imprisoned in the cave. She stated that while she loved that child dearly, it was not her child. There were no other human beings in the area where she was found, which was said to be a region of country abounding in monkeys, baboons, and bears. Back with her people, Espinosa continued to care for the child, who was christened Julia Pastrana. We next learn that after Espinosa's death, Julia was taken in as a servant girl by the governor of the Sinaloa. The governor wanted to study her as a curiosity. In 1854, Julia decided to return to her tribe after being mistreated. On her way back to her people, she was spotted by an American named M. Rates, who persuaded her to go to the United States and be exhibited for money in a sideshow. Rates billed her as the Marvelous Hybrid, or the Bear Woman, and she became a major attraction. In New York, Julia was examined by Dr. Alexander B. Mott, who declared her to be one of the most extraordinary beings of present day, a hybrid between a human and an orangutan. Under a new manager, J.W. Beach, Julia was exhibited in Cleveland. Here she was seen by Professor S. Bernard, M.D., who concluded that her hair, skin, and protruding jaws entitle her, I think, it to rank of distinct species. Now, with a third manager, a man by the name of Lent, Julia toured throughout Europe. During this time, we are told that another examination, possibly by Charles Darwin, revealed that her teeth were aligned like those of an ape, rather than being in the normal human alignment. Julia married Lent, and soon, in 1860, Moscow gave birth to a baby boy who resembled her in every way. Both mother and child died shortly after. The baby lived 35 hours. Julia died about 3 days later. Lent had the bodies of both Julia and the baby mummified and exhibited them. A photograph was taken in the early 1860s was Julia's mummy. The two mummies were last exhibited in the early 70s, including an American tour in 1972. Public outcry prevented further exhibits, so the mummies were put into storage at a fairground in Oslo, Norway. In 1976, thieves broke into the storage building and extensively damaged Julia's mummy. The baby mummy was thrown into a ditch outside and totally destroyed by mice. In 1979, thieves again broke into the building, this time taking Julia's mummy away. Remarkably, police recovered the complete artifact a short time later, after children reported that they found a human arm in Oslo suburb dump. The police did not notify the legal owner of the mummy. Instead, they turned it over to the Institute for Forensic Medicine, where it resides today. Dr. Jan Bonsan viewed the remains in 1990 and provided the following information in his book, A Cabinet of Medical Curiosities. When I saw Giulia Pastrani's mummy in 1990, it was standing on a small wooden board covered with fabric. The right arm had been torn off and lay in front of the mummy. The right side of the face had been torn open as well, and the eye on that side was missing. The Russian dancer's costume placed on the corpse in 1860 had been torn off by the thieves, and the mummy was completely unclothed apart from the remains of the original boots. The hairy growth was greatly diminished by the ravages of time, but the abnormal hairiness of the forehead was still evident, and parts of the whiskers were also preserved. The skin was dark brown and parchment-like. This comes to us from the Cabinet of Medical Curiosities by Dr. Bonsan, 1997. Actually, page 241. Giant human tracks found, believed to be those of Chief Bigfoot, Snake River, Idaho, 1862. A group of hunters reported that they found human-like footprints in this area. The prints measured 17.5 inches long and 6 inches wide at the widest part. It is believed the prints are those of Chief Bigfoot, a part white, part Indian renegade of very large stature, who has become leader of the hostile Indians in this region. This comes to us from the legendary Bigfoot of Idaho 100 years ago in the Walla Walla Union Bulletin, Washington, USA, October 16th, 1966. Wild giants attack fur trader, Fraser River Canyon, British Columbia, 1864. Hudson Bay Company inspector Alexander Caulfield Anderson reported that he and his party of fur traders were attacked with a bombardment of rocks hurled by wild giants of the mountains. This was from the Journal of Alexander Caulfield Anderson, 1864. Africa's giant wild man, a fierce savage who was slain by a lion hunter. Lake Nyasa, Africa, 1867. A fatal epidemic has broken out among the captive lions in all parts of the world. It is very like a epizooty which strikes horses, but nearly all the lions have died, so the price for lions has risen 200 to 300%. This has excited great activity among the famous lion hunters of Quilmaine, East Africa, who usually capture the animals by a covered pit method. The agent of the Great Hamburg Animal House recently penetrated the main lion range near Lake Nyasa, employed 42 Negroes, and had captured one lion and a few inferior beasts when he discovered that some mysterious creature was interfering with his pits. One morning, his men found a magnificent male lion dead in the pit. Apparently, he had been killed by a sharp-pointed stake, and there was huge tracks about, somewhat like those of a gorilla. I was satisfied, says the agent in his report, that no one but a man could make use of such a pole. Indeed, the fact of the poles being hardened by fire was proof significant that a man was engaged in the work. He must be a native, of course, and he must be also a wild man. After holding counsel with 3 or 4 of my best men, we started out in parties of 10 to hunt down the wild man. Each of my men had cheap English musket and knew how to use it, and the order was to fire at the man in sight. To brace up the courage of the natives, I offered a reward of $10 to whoever should fire the lucky shot. The 4 parties took different directions. The one I headed went to the north, where there was a long stretch of almost impenetrable thicket, with various paths traversing it in different directions. We had turned back, and the last man had just fallen in line when I heard a shot and a cry of alarm. The 3 natives next behind me dodged under my arms and made off down the path, while the others were so upset that it took me 3 or 4 minutes to ascertain what had happened. The wild man had been concealed behind a big tree next to the path. He leapt out and struck the last man a blow with his club and killed him on the spot. And he was swinging his weapon to hit the second man when the third man fired. The wild man bounded into the brush and disappeared. My men were panic-stricken. When I announced my intention the next morning to hunt him, the whole gang of black broke in lamentations. One young man, however, said, "I see, master, that if we do not kill this thing, he will kill all of our lions and many of us. If we move away, he will probably follow. It is our business to kill him at once. I am only a young man, but I will go with you and do my best." We agreed that in case we met the wild man face to face, he was to fire and then drop to the earth and give me a show. About 3 miles from camp, and as the path ascended a ridge, my companion halted, pointed at a broad tree on the left, and whispered, "Master, do you see that his house is there among the branches?" I could make out a platform of sticks and branches, and now I took the advance. My weapons were a rifle and a revolver. We crept cautiously forward until right underneath the platform, and after a few seconds, both of us made out a black foot and a leg hanging down between the poles. The wild man was at home, but the next was how to deal with him. I had more fear of his getting away than I had of his hurting us. I finally posted myself to the west, believing he would make for the thicket in that direction as soon as disturbed. And at a signal, the young man fired at the nest. The report of his gun was followed by the most unearthly yell, and it was yet ringing in my ears when I saw a dark object dropping off the platform to the earth. It was the wild man. The young man stood where he had fired, and before he could realize what was happening, the monster was upon him. He was picked up and flung almost at my feet, and as he landed, he called to me, "I am not hurt much, master. Be sure that you kill him, for he is a terribly strong fellow." The man didn't seek safety in flight. On the contrary, he picked up a limb broken off a part of it for a club and slowly advanced upon us. His eyes flashing, his teeth gritting, and his face expressed fury. I had my rifle to the face, and I let him come within 10 feet before I fired. He was shot between the eyes, and he fell back so dead that he never moved a finger. When we came to examine him, he got frightened. His height was 7 feet by the tape line, and he seemed to be all muscle. I haven't the least doubt that a slap from his big hand would have killed any of us stone dead. He had tremendous shoulders with muscles bunched up in a wonderful way, while his fingers were long, and the nails on them almost like claws. Hundreds of natives came to look at the body, but none could remember of having seen the man before. Freed from his interferences with our enterprise, we had no more trouble, and during the next 60 days, we caught and dispatched to the coast 11 as handsome lions as ever seen. This comes to us from Big News Prints, Frederick, Maryland, United States publication, July 30th, 1892. Wild Man of the Manitouis, Little Manitou Island, Lake Michigan, July 11th, 1868. A wild man has been discovered on Little Manitou Island in Lake Michigan, and efforts are being made to capture him. Mr. J.R. Anderson, who is spending the summer on one of the Manitous, wrote the following upon the discovery. Some 10 days ago, one of our party took his boat and started for Little Manitou, one of our group of islands about 4 miles distant from the one on which we are encamped. He returned about 8 o'clock in the afternoon and relayed that after he had landed upon the island, he heard what he supposed was a man howling loudly, as though in distress. Then he proceeded to the spot from whence the noise seemed to come, and when within 10 or 15 feet of it, he said he saw a form that had the appearance of a man at least 8 feet tall, entirely naked, with his body covered in hair. His face had the appearance of intellectually, his brow being high quality, his beard descending nearly to his stomach, and his hair was disheveled and coarse. As the monster saw the approach of my informant, he gave a loud shriek, and at once fled, knowing that it would be impossible to overtake him. My friend returned to his boat and came home. After relating his story, we held a consultation and decided to make up a party the next day, return to the island, and hunt the monster up. At 10 o'clock we landed on the island and commenced our search. In choosing our positions, I took that which would lead me to the west on the shore of the lake. I had not proceeded far when I beheld the unknown sitting upon a beach, washing his feet in the pure water of the lake. I approached him gently, and hoped to be able to capture him without trouble, but when within at least 20 feet of him, he heard me approaching, and at once, springing to his feet, and commenced to run, I fired upon him with my gun, but failed to bring him down. I then endeavored to overtake him, but my efforts were fruitless. The rest of the party were not able to get sight of him, and it is as yet unknown where he succeeds in hiding. We start out tomorrow again in hopes of catching him, and, if possible, in finding out who he is. There is a story afloat among the older fishermen of the island some 20 years ago, a woman lost a child here about 4 years of age, that every effort was made to find it, but all efforts were unsuccessful, and the bereaved mother at last came to the conclusion that her boy had been stolen and carried off by someone of the wandering tribes of Indians that inhabited the islands. As I said before, we start tomorrow in search of the strange character, and I will, as soon as possible, give you the result of our trip. Note, this incident was also reported in another paper in July 28, 1868, with the added speculation that the creature is the missing boy who is now an adult. This comes to us from the St. Joseph's Herald, Michigan, June 11th, 1868. Also, again, in the Cosent Democrat, Ohio, June 28th, 1868. A Monster, Meadville, Franklin County, Mississippi, August 28th, 1868. We take the following from the St. Louis Dispatch: a strange visaged creature, apparently one of nature's prodigies, has been discovered near Meadville, Franklin County, Mississippi. causing much excitement in that unusual, monotonous village. A letter from a friend residing in that village, dated June 2nd, says, At this time there is much agitated on account of a strange creature seen here. It is said to be similar to one seen near Vicksburg last fall. The Vicksburg paper of that date, some few days subsequent to the discovery of this strange creature near the place, gave a full description of it and the manner in which it was discovered, which, given the memory, is in substance about as follows. Sometime in September last, a party of huntsmen were driving in the swamps some few miles from the river. A trail was broken by the hounds and followed up a brisk pace, leaving the party far behind. In following the dogs, they discovered the track of the game in some mirry places, which appeared similar to the track of a human foot, and they observed also that the toes of one foot turned backward. On coming up with the dogs, which were now baying, they beheld a frightful-looking creature of about the average height of a man, but with far greater muscular development, standing menacingly a few yards in front of the dogs. It had long, coarse hair flowing from its head and reaching near its knees. Its entire body also seemed to be covered with hair of 2 or 3 inches in length, which was of dark brown color. From its upper jaw projected 2 large tusks several inches long. Its head, a face, as well as could be determined from the distance of observers, bore a striking resemblance to that of a Negro, except that the chin and cheeks were covered with long hair. On the near approach of the hunters, it fled with great rapidity toward the Mississippi River, and was not overtaken again until within a few yards of the bank. When the party came up with the dogs the second time, the monster was standing erect before them, none of them having yet dared to clinch with it. But when the dogs were urged by their masters, they endeavored to seize it. When it reached forward and grabbed on them, and taking it in its hands, pressed it against its tusks, which pierced it through and killed it instantly. Becoming alarmed at the display of strength, the hunters fired several shots at the creature, which caused it to leap into the river. It remained under water several minutes, and then rose almost entire length above the surface, uttering shrieks which almost petrified the pursuers with terror. No similar sound had ever come to these men, who were all familiar with howl of a wolf, the whine of a panther, and the hoarse bellowing of an alligator. After sinking and rising several times, it swam to the Louisiana shore and disappeared. This comes to us from the West Coast Times, August 29th, 1869. Also the St. Louis Dispatch, the Otago Times, September 4th, 1868. Also the Panama Star and Herald, date unknown. Gorilla in Ohio, Gallia County, Ohio, January 23rd, 1869. Gallipolis is excited over a wild man who is reported to haunt the woods near the city. He goes naked and is covered with hair. His gigantic height and his eyes start from their sockets. A carriage containing a man and a daughter was attacked by him a few days ago. He is said to have bounded at the father, catching him in a grip like a vice, hurling him to the earth, falling on him, and endeavoring to bite and scratch like a wild man. The struggle was long and fearful, rolling and wallowing in a deep mud. Half suffocated, the father, sometimes beneath his adversary, whose burning and maniac eyes glared into his own with murderous and savage intensity. Just as he, the father, was about to become exhausted from his exertions, his daughter, taking courage at the imminent danger of her parent, snatched up a rock and hurling it at the head of her father's would-be murderer. was fortunate enough to put an end to the struggle by striking him, the wild man, after which he slowly got up and retired into the neighboring copse and skirted the road. This comes to us from the Weekly Record, Minnesota, United States, January 23rd, 1869. A wild man, a hideous monster roaming about in the neighborhood of Woodhull and Tropsburg, New York. Woodhull, Tropsburg, New Jersey, July 10th, 1869. A correspondent of the Hornellsville paper tells the following veracious story. Voracious? Voracious. Sorry, guys. For the very strange story I am about to relate, I scarcely expect, nor do I solicit belief. Indeed, were it not that hundreds of reliable men and women in the county of Steuben are ready and willing to vouch for its truthfulness, I would never ask you to put it into print. The facts are as follows. During the 4 weeks last past, a wild man has been prowling around the woods in the towns of Woodhull and Tropsburg in the southern part of this county, coming frequently into the highways and cleared fields. To the intense terror of women and children, and even strong men, so great is the excitement in some parts of the towns mentioned, that schools have been broken up, parents not daring to send their little ones along to the public highways, to the school buses. At first the whole thing was considered by most people as a hoax, intended merely to frighten old women and children, but as many of the most prominent citizens vouched for the actual existence of this wild man, and the disturbance of the schools was making it a matter of public importance, the people of Woodhull and Tropsburg determined to do all in their power to ferret the matter out. According, on the 12th, about 200 men assembled at the residence of Mr. B.G. Brown and proceeded to search the woods in the immediate locality. Under the leadership of Captain J.J. Bachman, and the writer of this article crowd searched the woods for hours, but with not success further than that finding of a campfire and the track of a barefooted man imprinted in soft soil of a marshy part of the forest. And the whole party, at about 3:00 p.m., returned to Mr. Brown's house, and getting ready, their team started back to Woodhull village. The party had proceeded scarcely 50 rods from Mr. Brown's when on the outskirts of the wood, and within 20 rods of the band of searchers, appeared the veritable wild man of the woods. Myself, Captain Buchan, and others immediately started in full pursuit. We approached within 6 to 8 rods of this strange being without attracting his notice, when suddenly, with a wet, unearthly shriek, he noticed us that we all perceived. I drew my rifle, intending to halt him or send a bullet crashing through his skull. I ordered him to halt, when he sprung with the agility of a deer toward the woods. I did not fire because, on second thought, I doubted my right to take a life of any human being, however wild, until he had at least violated some law. So far, I have related facts which will be vouched for by at least 100 persons. I will now give you a perfect description of this wild man, or animal, or what is it, as he, she, or it appeared to me. He was barefooted, bareheaded, and wore no clothes, except for an old pair of soldier's pants. His hair, which was black, sprinkled with gray, was from 2 to 3 feet long, frizzy and matted, hanging over his neck, face, shoulders, and back, reaching halfway to the ground. His beard reached to his waistband of his pants, and was jet black. This, together with a springing, jerking hitch in his gait, gave him more the appearance of a wild animal than a human being. And though I am not of a nervous temperament. May all the saints in heaven shield and defend me from ever meeting such a fiendish-looking being face to face again. The long matted hair, the thick, black, uncombed beard, the wild, glaring, bloodshot eyeballs, which seemed bursting from their sockets, the savage, haggard, unearthly, the wild, beastly appearance of this thing, whether man or animal, has haunted me continually by day and night. And I do not wonder that when this strange being rapped on the schoolhouse window, children were frightened half out of their senses and refused to be pacified. For although I have seen the chiefs of 50 different tribes of the Rocky Mountain Indians painted for warpath, and have looked with wonder on the stuffed gorilla, Barnum's, what is it, the man-monkey, etc., I have never beheld anything in human form half as hideous as the wild man of Woodall Woods. I close by saying that 25 years ago a man named William Little suddenly mysteriously disappeared from Woodall, and has never been heard of since. And as the farm on which the wild man spends most of his time was formerly owned by the absentee, it is supposed by some that the wild man is none other than William Little himself, returned in this disguise to the home of his youth. But I hardly think this theory is a true one. I do believe, however, that a woman and a baby are somewhat mixed up in the matter. This comes to us from the Evening Gazette, Port Jervis, New York, July 10th, 1869. Ugly beast terrorizes valley, Crawford County, Kansas, August 1869. Farm people in this county are up in arms over some kind of human-like creature that regularly appears terrorizing women and children, and apparently breaking down fences. The following letter, received from a resident farmer, explains their dilemma. We of Arcadia Valley in the southern part of Crawford County are having a new sensation which may lead to some new disclosures in natural history. If investigated, as it should be, it is nothing less than a discovery of a wild man or gorilla. Or, what is it? It has at different times been seen by almost every inhabitant of the valley, and it occasionally has been seen in the adjoining counties of Missouri. But it seems to make its home in this vicinity. Several times it has approached the cabins of the settlers, much to the terror of the women and children, especially if the men happen to be absent working in the fields. In one instant it approached the house of one of our old citizens, but was driven away with clubs by one of the men. It has so near a resemblance to a human form that the men are unwilling to shoot it. It is difficult to give a description of this wild man or animal. It has a stooping gait, long, very long arms with immense hands or claws. It has a hairy face, and those who have been near it describe it as having the most ferocious expression. Generally walks on its hind legs, but sometimes on all fours. The beast, or what is it, is as cowardly as ugly, and it is next to impossible to get near enough to obtain a good view of it. The settlers, not knowing what to call it, has christened it Old Sheaf. Since the appearance, our fences are often falling down, allowing the stock free range in our cornfields. I suppose Old Sheaf is only following his inclination, as it may be easier for him to pull them down than climb over. However, as it is, curses loud and deep are heaping upon its head by the settlers. The settlers are divided in opinion as to whether it belongs to the human family or not. Probably it will be found to be a gorilla or a large orangutan that has escaped from some zoo in the settlements east of here. At one point, over 60 of our citizens turned out to hunt it down, but it escaped. but probably owing to the fright that it received, it kept out of sight of several days. And just as settlers were congregating themselves, that they were rid of the intolerable nuisance, old Chef came back again, seemingly as savage as ever. If it meets the eye of any showman who has lost one of his collection of beasts, he may know where to find it. At present, it is the terror of all the women and children. In the valley, it cannot be caught, and nobody is willing to shoot it. This came to us quoting from a letter to St. Louis paper dated August 15th, 1869. It also comes, what is it, a guerrilla or wild man in Kansas, the Dubuque Daily Herald, Iowa, United States, September 4th, 1869. Wow. These just get better and better as time goes. I mean, from the beginning till it gets closer to us. I mean, yeah, we're in the 1860s, almost 70s, but you know what's crazy, and I said it the other day, is the writing, and how the other day when I said they compared it to a white man, and I found that strange, and someone commented maybe that's all the guy ever examined was white people, and no, that was just how things were worded back then. It's basic social studies. We learned it in like 7th grade. But I just find it very interesting how unpolitically correct they were back then. I mean, they just didn't give a shit what they said, you know, and I am blown away and thankful that, you know, we have just, even though modern times is kind of screwed up, I'm thankful that it's gotten better, because it's pretty weird back then. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today, earlier's upload and today's bonus upload. I really love doing these, and I hope you do too. So with that, I'm going to bid you farewell, and everyone have a great night. See ya!